The extraordinary is in what we do, not who we are.
Hi guys, this is Dormouse03.
And this is Kat.
And this is a new video series that we're going to do called Those Gamer Girls. And we wanted to explain kind of what this is about before we get into our topic for today. And so basically what we wanted to do with this is kind of have a forum where we can discuss different things. Usually they're probably going to be related to gaming because that's kind of what we like to do a lot. That's what my channel is kind of based around. So it's usually going to be topics within gaming and the gaming world. And we want to really try to engage people in thinking critically about games. And I think that takes a little bit of explanation.
Well, I think sometimes people get confused when you say thinking critically about something. They hear the word critical and they think negative, but you know, what we mean is just taking a closer look at the material, kind of engaging with it more, pushing yourself to think about it a little more, you know, not just looking at the flaws. It is good to acknowledge the flaws, but also looking at what you liked and why you liked it, elements of the story, that kind of stuff.
Right. And I think not just today we're going to be talking about a game and our thoughts on a particular game, but I think we're going to also be thinking about things like outside of just a particular game. So issues, I don't know, like you know, the industry or how certain things are integrated across games or across platforms, or how people might react within the community, just different things like that. I think another big point about this is that, you know, we're two people, we often agree about things, but not always. And we aren't looking to just put our thoughts out there just so that everyone can agree with us. We do really like to have a dialogue about things. And, you know, if you don't agree with something that we're saying, we really want to have a conversation with you guys. And so, you know, if you want to put a post or send us a message or whatever you want to do, that's really what we're interested in doing with this, is really starting people to think about a certain topic, giving our opinion on it, and then having kind of an open forum for you guys to share your opinions with us. On that note, I think that it's also important to talk about just briefly that we don't want it to be anything like trash talking or trolling or flaming. If you have an opinion, try to tell us why you have an opinion. You know, don't just leave a comment like I don't agree or you guys suck or, you know, whatever. Those kinds of things don't really matter to us. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree, but we're always going to be respectful of you, and, you know, we expect the same. And that's all on that. So I think we want to move straight on ahead into our actual topic for today, which is going to be Tomb Raider.
So we just picked up the game. We got it the day it came out. We played through the single player and we absolutely loved it. We played a little bit of the multiplayer, And now we want to kind of take a deeper look at some of the stuff in the game, like the story and gameplay, and some of the things that we liked, and then also some of the things that we didn't care too much for.
Right. And so I think the easiest place to start is with gameplay, because I think for the most part the gameplay works really, really well. I mean, the controls are very, very smooth. Once you get all of the abilities that you have, they work very well together, and it's very easy to move from one thing to the next. You know, it's really easy to go from shooting somebody to sliding down a zip line to climbing up a rock face. It just works really, really well together, and it's all very intuitive.
It's really seamless and streamlined.
As far as the weapons, I know that you really liked the bow.
I was super excited about the bow. And a bow is something that, again, you know, if it's done poorly, it can be really annoying. But if it's done right, it is super fun. And they just completely nailed it with this game. I mean, it's my favorite weapon.
Yeah, definitely. It feels powerful enough. You can get headshots with it, which
sneaky,
is awesome.
Sneaky headshots.
You can sneak behind someone and like grab them around the neck with it and get like sneak kills. You can zoom in with it, which I didn't
neither
realize.
of us realized
until I was playing back through again. But you can click in the right stick to zoom, which makes it even that much better than it was. When you get different attachments to it, it becomes even more awesome. Like when you get flaming arrows and you can set things on fire, when you get the rope and you can pull people down from ledges. I mean, it's very versatile, and as you upgrade it, it gets even better. And I would say that that's the case with all of the weapons.
Yeah.
You know, you can upgrade them, they get better, you can put silencers on them, you can get different types of ammo. Your shotgun has incendiary, shells. And all of that is really easy to equip and unequip, because you have 4 weapons, which I really like. I don't like to have too many weapons in these types of things, because I always feel like I never really use them to their full capacity. I'll pick 1 or 2 that I really like, and then that's all that I use. But with this, I found myself swapping between them and, turning on and off the attachments, because you just, if you want to equip your bow, you push up on the D-pad, and if you want to equip a flaming arrow on it, you push up again. And then if you want to take that off, you push up again. So you don't ever have to go in and out of menus and things to equip the attachments that you want, which I think makes it really, really stand out from other things that I've played, because it makes it very simple to swap between your weapons and to swap between even the different mods and attachments that are on your weapons.
And each of those weapons are useful in different situations, so you're not thinking, well, which is the best weapon to use here? It's like you've got 4 of them. You know, if you've got a crowd, you use your rifle. If you're trying to do sneaky kills, use your bow or a silenced pistol or something. And, the shotgun is good when people get up in your face or they're the tougher enemies.
So yeah, as far as quick time events, I think that they were pretty intuitive and not overused.
Definitely. One thing that we hadn't talked about that kind of ties into the quick time events too is sort of the action sequences of the games, which I thought were fantastic. They used slow motion in some of the really actiony parts where, you're running and jumping, and I think that gave a really good effect to those sequences. And like everything else, it wasn't overused to the point that you're like, oh, slow motion again.
The last thing that I really wanted to say about gameplay isn't necessarily a gameplay thing, but it has to do with it, I suppose, and that is that there is no HUD. There's no really thing on your screen that is showing you your health bar or, your ammo or anything like that. The only time you have something like that is when you have a weapon drawn, then it will show you how much ammo you have. But when you don't have that weapon drawn, there's nothing there. And so I feel like that makes it that much more immersive. You get into the world and there's nothing sort of in your face cluttering your screen and making it feel more like gamey, I guess. And all of the, when you get hurt, you can see it on the screen and you can feel it in the vibration of the controller. The screen will start to get red, and then it will go black and white when you're really hurt, and then it'll clear back up when you're okay again. So I think, I don't know, that really did something for me. I mean, it helped me put myself into the game a little bit more, and I think that that's only a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Alright. So moving on from gameplay, I think we now want to go into digging a little bit more into the story, and we're going to try to keep this spoiler free
as much as possible.
As much as possible. I mean, we are going to talk about some of the things as far as characterization and things that happen, but we're not going to go too in detail about the actual plot points.
Right.
If that makes sense. But if you don't want to know anything about anything that happens to anyone ever, or, who's in the game, then then I guess you should maybe stop listening now.
Right. Come back when you play the game, because it's fantastic.
Because it's great, and it's worth your time. So, starting out with story, I think, Kat, maybe you wanted to talk a little bit about the structure and what you thought of how the game was laid out.
Well, of course, as a writer, my brain immediately goes to the way a story is structured. That's just like the geek in me that won't turn off. And one of the things that struck me immediately with this game is the way it doesn't, like a lot of games, have that slow build up in the beginning. It doesn't start with this kind of like prologue-y cutscene. It brings you right into the action right away. You're just thrust into it, and as you go along, you progress a little bit further in the game after you've done some of the action. Then it starts filling in the story with some video journal type things that Laura watches at campfire. And I think that kind of non-linear structure really works for what they were going with, for this, crashed on an island survival kind of thing, that they didn't take that slow build, that they just thrust you right into the action, and that's so much more immersive because you feel it. You're there, you're not, and now we're sitting on the boat chatting for whatever and doing whatever, you're right into it, and then it fills in bits of the story as necessary for the first bit, and then the story progresses as normal. And I think that was a really great way to go about it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I would add that being thrust into the action really helps you get into the character of Lara, because she's really thrust into this situation. And so by forcing the player into it that way, it gets you more into that character. And it's one of the ways that this game really puts you into that position. And I think that it works really well in doing that.
Yeah, you don't have that time to get into that sort of comfort zone. You're just immediately in it, and you're just overwhelmed. It's like, whoa, this is happening, that is happening, and you feel more like Lara would be feeling in that moment,
right.
And that's great.
Yes. And then it sort of fills in some of the story with the journals and the things that you find, the artifacts and stuff like that, help fill in and flesh out the story as you're going along, while also retaining that sort of action pace, and having those kind of, I guess, quieter moments where you can just go around and explore really help keep it at a nice pace where it's not action, action, action all the time.
Right.
It has a nice flow to it.
And you can do it sort of at your own pace to an extent, too. I mean, the story itself stands alone fantastically, but, you know, if you're taking the time to explore and find all those extra journals, that really fleshes it out, and then you can get kind of the experience you want from it. You can go quickly to the next story point, or you can stop and kind of get more familiar with the characters and the world and stuff, and I think that's cool, too.
Right. So moving right along to characterization, I think that it's important for us as female gamers to talk a little bit about what we think of Lara as a character. I think in this game versus previous games, and you know how we think they did with making that strong female character. And personally, I think they did a great job.
Yes, they did.
And I think one of the things that we have talked about before is the idea of a strong female character is tricky because you don't want to over-highlight her gender.
Because at a certain point, it becomes, you know, not a well fleshed out character. It becomes a caricature if you draw too much attention to that, right, and put too much focus on it, and
hit someone over the head with,
yeah,
I'm strong, I'm a female, and I'm strong, and I'm a female, and, you know, it just becomes too much. It's like overcompensating, and nobody wants that.
And at a certain point, that actually hurts your cause more than helps it.
Right. It makes it seem like almost to be a, quote, strong female, you have to point out all the time how strong you are and that you're a girl, and that those two things are sort of intertwined too much. And I think that this works really well in that you're just Lara, you know?
Right.
It's not really highlighting the fact that she's female and doing this. You're just, this is you, this is the character, this is her. And she's in this situation and she's doing what she needs to do. And it's not beating you over the head with the fact that she's female. And, you know, it's just a person. And you could take that character and put it onto a male character very easily. And I think that that's a strength, you know, that they're not trying to make her sort of overly capable to try to counteract her being a female or something, because when you get to that point, it makes it feel like, you know, isn't it great that she can do this because she's a woman? And that is not the message. The message is, isn't it great that she can... Right. And the message from this is, isn't it great that she can do this? Period.
Right.
You know?
It's amazing that anyone can do the stuff that she can do. And no one ever questions that she can do it because she's a girl, you know? Right. They have confidence that she can do it.
Exactly. And so it's not that she thinks that all the time, and I think that that's really important as being an origin story, you know, but from the very beginning, she's reassuring herself. She's like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And that's almost like a mantra that she has throughout the game.
Yeah.
And
she does say it quite a few times.
I think in the beginning, it's kind of, she doesn't necessarily believe it. Like, she wants to believe it, but she has to keep telling herself that. And by the end, she doesn't have to anymore. She knows she can do it.
Right.
And that she has done it.
And it's never a matter of, I don't think I can do this, you know, because I'm a girl or any of that kind of thing. It's just, the things that she's doing, they are pretty incredible feats. And to keep going, that takes a lot of inner fortitude. So... Right. You know, it's understandable that she struggles with it at first, and I think that makes her a really human character.
Right.
That she doesn't just jump in and go, yeah, make this crazy jump, or, make it through when I'm really badly wounded, no problem. She has to tell herself, I can do this, and look for that strength, and I think that's a really good way to show that origin of the character.
Right. And I think that they made her very real. They made her very realistic in a lot of ways. I mean, in the beginning, she's young and she isn't all that confident. I mean, she's done things before. She's gone on, expeditions and exploration and adventures before, but she's never done anything like this and had to deal with the kind of adversities that she's having to deal with now. And so, on top of that, she was the one that had the idea to go to this particular location, and so she then feels responsible. And the person who was sort of the leader of the expedition is wounded and can't really take that role anymore. And so, her sort of having to step up and say, I'm responsible for these people, I got them into this, I need to be able to do this or we're not going to be able to get out of here, I think is a really great way to shape the character, because you get the idea of someone who is really intelligent and is really capable and has a lot of skills, but they never really took the lead, and now being sort of shoved into the lead is kind of shaping her into who she is and who she's going to become. And I think that it just works really well.
Yeah, she's coming into her own as a leader for the first time, and I think they really nailed that. Because that is a difficult thing to do, and do well.
I think we really liked the way that they portrayed her getting injured. Not that we like to see her getting injured,
no.
And she really has far too many concussions
when that happens.
Within this game, it's like concussion number 1, concussion number 2, concussion number 47. But
infection
that she shows
1.
That she's I know, infections. But they do talk about antiseptics and stuff. So, there is a level of she gets hurt, but they try to make it a little bit realistic as far as, she doesn't just, get shot in the shoulder and keep shooting like nothing is happening.
She doesn't fall down a long way and then pop back up and dust off her shoulder and go, yeah, I'm good.
And do a backflip or something.
Front flipper style.
I mean, she gets hurt, and then for a little while, she's hurt. She has to go find things to, bandage wounds or cauterize injuries, and things like that. And I think that adds a little bit to it because it makes it more real, because as action hero as she is, it does give you that sense of, there is a sense of danger here. I mean, that, and this is not a spoiler, I hope,
No.
that she's not going to die.
Right.
There is no danger of her dying within this game. But they do have things, that make you feel for the character. Like, wow,
that's gotta hurt.
That's gotta hurt. Or that must be really difficult. Or, God, I don't know if I could do that.
Probably
and
not.
it adds to this sort of showing you the sort of inner, like you were saying, inner fortitude that she has.
Yeah, and,
so
and that's just something that you have to deal with when you're trying to survive. And with the whole theme, it seemed, of this being like surviving and finding that strength, it's good to show the character's weakness too, because I think that's part of the trope of the strong female character, that they'll show absolutely no weaknesses whatsoever, and I think it's good
Right.
to see your character stumbling and in pain, but then fighting through that and finding a way to cope with that, and I think that's a really good way of doing that, and
Right.
I'm glad
Because
that they
in a
took
way
that
that's-
angle.
That's stronger than
Yes.
showing someone who never gets hurt.
Right, well, if you never get touched, then it's easy for you, and that's not really...
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't seem as strong as,
To me.
having a hard time and still persevering.
So yeah, I think we should definitely talk about the support cast. Just briefly, I think that they were well done. I think that it was kind of a nice balance between really being support characters. It was clear that they were not in any way, shape, or form the focus of the game. The definite focus was on Lara, and they all sort of supported her in their own ways. But they weren't, quite a caricature or a trope either. They had elements of being kind of the stereotypical this or that, but they were a little bit more fleshed out than that, which I appreciated.
Yeah, and they were more interesting than that, too. Like, you were never sitting there thinking, oh, this character is boring because, they're just this type of character. They did a really good job of making a more complex dynamic between those side characters, not just with their interaction with Lara, but also amongst themselves. And you see that in some of the little scenes that you're given, like the video diary kind of things in the beginning, and just in cutscenes, and also through the various journals that kind of give you the individual perspectives. So they did a good job of fleshing that out and giving more to it than just a cut and dry, here's this stereotypical old sailor guy or whatever it happens to be.
And I think that the voice actors did a really great job as well.
Yes, they did. It was very well
making
acted.
in making them not those tropes. And you were talking about how all of them, like the things that they talk about in the journals and things, also help characterize Lara. So you don't necessarily always get from her that, I didn't want to be the leader, or I don't want to be in the spotlight, but now I am. And she doesn't sort of go on and monologue about that, but you get little snippets of that kind of aspect from, say, Sam's journals, or that little interaction in the video clip.
You get to see different sides of the characters, and that's good, because whenever you're in just one character's head, that can skew your view of the character, and it's good to be able to branch out and see that from those other perspectives, because that, by contrast, that helps characterize Lara.
Right. One other thing that I really want to mention here as far as characterizing Lara is the antagonist of the game. And so the villain, his name is Matthias, and I think as an antagonist he works really well, and I didn't really realize this until I was thinking about it the other day with you. That the way he's set up is really as kind of similar to Lara, but also kind of highlights how he is different from her, like just the opposite to her in every way, in every other way. So they're both these people who were sort of shipwrecked on this island and are trying to leave and are trying to survive. But that's kind of where it stops. It's in how they interact with other people and how they choose to go about that survival and how they choose to go about trying to leave this island that really highlights why he's the villain and why she's the hero. And I think that it's very subtle, or at least it was to
yeah.
me, because I didn't even realize it until later when I was thinking about it. But, you know, he has a line in there where he suggests to Lara that they are the same. You know, we're both just trying to survive. And you think about that and you're like, yeah, that's true on the surface, but what makes them different is in their actions, in what they do. You know, he is completely focused on himself and his own survival, and he is willing to kill and use people and manipulate people and do some really horrible things if you read some of those, or if you listen to some of those journals, which another thing we really liked is that they were read to us. It was a fantastic choice.
Especially because you can't read stuff on your screen.
I know, my screen, and it's non-HD quality.
I didn't have to read them all to you instead.
Which was very good. But, you know, he does some really horrible things in order to maintain his spot as the leader and to kind of manipulate the direction that he wants things to go. And you really see his selfishness there and the lengths that he's willing to go in order to ensure his own survival and his own leadership. And here's Lara, and she's the exact opposite of that. You know, she is being the leader because she's stepping up to try to save everybody else. And it's in taking that responsibility for others and putting herself in danger and putting herself on the line in order to try to save these other people and make sure that they all get off the island that really sets them apart. And it really shows how, you know, a similar kind of motivation can go in completely opposite directions, you know.
Right, well,
and
it's the means by which they do that, and the motivation,
you know. Yeah, and I think that Matthias as a villain, I mean, he was very realistic. I mean, he had very human reasons for doing everything that he did, and yet it was a clearly evil act.
It was the monstrous means that he used, the things that he did, that, you know, he dehumanized people in order to manipulate them to do what he wanted so that he could get off the island. And that's just, in no way is that the same thing as what Lara is doing, even if they're both trying to accomplish this essentially the same thing, get off the island.
And even if they're both willing to kill people in order to do it, it's for very different reasons, and it's those reasons behind the actions that are really setting them apart. And I think that really adds to her development as a character. You know, his existence and the things that he does and the ways in which he's similar to her, but the completely different means by which they go about things, I think it really adds to her characterization and her growth.
It's
so that's
a
definitely
fantastic
something
contrast,
that I really liked. Yeah, for sure.
And it's very subtle. They don't smack you over the head with it like they could, and that's great because that gets you to think about it. Instead of just doing all the work for you and saying, hey, look, they're really similar, but they're different because Lara's a hero and he's not. You know. Which too many narratives do.
So, yeah, the last thing that I think we have time to really talk about is the ending of the game, and not spoiling the ending of the game for anybody who hasn't played it, and you should.
Yes.
But for anyone who hasn't, I think that it ended up very nicely with, you know, how Lara had grown and how, you know, everyone else was focused on, well, now we can get away from this. You know, we can get back to civilization, we can get back to our lives,
we're
that
safe,
kind of thing.
Yay, it's over.
We're safe, yay. You know, and Lara is not that way. She's completely come into her own. She's accepted her sort of place in the world. She's found who she is and what she wants from her life, and she's ready to go out and do it, and she's ready for that next adventure. And she's wanting to look for answers, and she's found her sort of motivation. And I think that is a really nice way to wrap up this as an origin story, and it also really leaves you wanting more, right? You want to go on that next adventure.
As soon as you get to that point, you're like, wait, we're done? Can I have the next one now? Because, you know, she's come such a long way, and you've come such a long way, and they did such a good job of hooking you in that you're like, so what's the next adventure? You know, where can we go next? So as Lara comes to that conclusion, you're drawn along with her to, like, yeah, I want to go and do the next thing. And I think that's the product of really great storytelling and a really great game.
So I think they did, overall, a really great job of rebooting the series.
Absolutely.
Of making her an actual, real, you know, character in this one, whereas she wasn't as much in the previous games. And
you can relate to her as a person and what she's gone through,
and you see why she's the flagship of this series. You see why, this is a character that matters and needs to be out there. Whereas before it was just kind of like she was Indiana Jones with boobs.
Yep.
So I think they did a really great job of it.
Yes, they did.
On to something that we didn't like as much.
Yeah.
And that is the multiplayer.
You know, when you're studying literature, it always needs to match up. The form of something needs to match with its content. And, you know, you look at this and the type of game that it is, you know, with the tombs and the puzzles and that sort of stuff, and it's a traditionally single-player game. And then you look at the multiplayer, and it just doesn't fit. It doesn't match.
No.
There's no reason for it. It's like this thing that just got tacked on, and all you're left wondering is, why?
Why? Why is this here? And the answer to that, from the product that they delivered to us, the answer to that has to be money in some way. That they were trying to hook in people who want multiplayer and try to bring them into this game, rather than saying, you know, we have our audience of people who really like single player stuff, so we're going to deliver what they want. And they did. Let's not, you know, kid ourselves. They delivered what I wanted from the single player.
Yes.
You know, in no way, shape,
Very
or
much
form
did
they fail at that. But I think they definitely failed at the multiplayer. I mean, it functions, it works, it's amusing for a minute, but it shouldn't be there. You know, I think the bottom line is that there's nothing fresh or new or different or interesting enough about it to justify its existence.
Right, it's something that was cool in theory, but in practice it just falls short.
And I don't think that it's going to make anybody who really loves Call of Duty and really loves Halo, and that's all that they want to do is play multiplayer, buy Tomb Raider. You know,
Right.
I don't think so. I mean, it's like if you were a knife seller and you sold knives, and you sold hunting knives and bowie knives and all different kinds of knives, and you had this clientele who liked knives and loved your knives and wanted a great knife. And then you decided, you know, we could make a lot more money if we could get other people who didn't really, you know, care for knives as much to buy our product. So what we're going to do is add a spatula to it. And I mean, just the ridiculousness of it. But that's the point. You know, so if we put a spatula on this knife, we're going to be able to sell this to people who like knives, and people who like spatulas. And we're gonna make so much money! And it just doesn't work that way, right? The people who want a spatula are gonna go buy a spatula. They are not gonna want a knife spatula. And the people who want a knife, they might be still interested in that knife, but then they're gonna look at it and say, why the fuck am I paying for this spatula?
Exactly.
On the end of it. And, you know, it really doesn't make sense. Like, I know that they had a whole different team that worked on the multiplayer, and so, you know, none of our resources were taken away from the single player and that kind of thing. But the money that went into making that multiplayer could have gone into making more single player DLC. It could have gone into making some, like, I don't know, we think it would be fun to, like, maybe have some co-op tombs or something that you could explore with a friend and, like, had some co-op aspect to them, like the Portal 2 multiplayer does, or the Portal 2 co-op does.
Or like a co-op
where you're
side
going
story
through
thing with a few tombs in it or something. It's super easy to do.
Something like that would have tied in a lot better, and, you know, and even if they didn't want to do that at all, you know, to just do more single player content, or to work toward the next game.
Exactly.
You know, any of those things would have been better uses of that money that they put into that multiplayer than what they gave us.
And I think we should qualify that statement with the fact that we do like multiplayer. It isn't that we're just complaining because we hate multiplayer. Yeah. We never like to play it.
We love Halo.
We love Halo multiplayer.
You know.
And even Mass Effect multiplayer was pretty fun to do.
And to a degree, I like Gears multiplayer as well. I mean, it functions. It does. It functions. We played it. We killed dudes.
Though the matchmaking
system set them in traps. Bad. You know, the matchmaking system is bad. You get unbalanced teams. You can't form a party with your friends. So we had to join games and then invite each other and hope that we were able to join the game before it filled up.
And there's no drop in, drop out either. So if you get booted out of the game or whatever, then you have to wait till it's over.
Are real problems as far as the multiplayer goes. And those things are problems that if you're gonna have something where you want it to be focused on multiplayer, where you want that to be a focus, then you need to not have those problems.
Right.
You know, those things just need to not be there. Because when you look at any of the big multiplayer games, Call of Duty and Halo and Gears to an extent, and that's all I can think of really. I'm sure that there are others. But when you look at those types of things, they don't have those problems.
No, because if you want someone to be spending any significant period of time playing it, and based on the achievements that they have, not all of them, but the rank-related ones, they expect you to be playing for a long time. And if you're like us and want to be playing them together to make that more interesting, because as fun as multiplayer is, if you're going to play it for a very long period of time, you need to have something like that. Or at least
you want to be doing it with your friends, right? That's kind of the idea of multiplayer, is that you can play with your friends.
Is not good, because that's just going to be a frustration, a constant frustration.
Yes. It has enough problems that it tells me that sure, they put some time and effort in doing it because it works well enough to know that they did, but they didn't put enough time and focus into it to make it good enough and interesting enough to keep people wanting to play that. Right. And your people who are going to be attracted to playing the Tomb Raider single player are not really going to care about that multiplayer stuff. Sure, they might be amused by it for a minute, but they're not going to care. They're not going to want 20 new map packs for that, and, you know, all these skins and whatever.
And already the first DLC that's coming up for it is
going to be
maps.
Multiplayer. And, you know, it's like, you should know your audience, guys. If you produce a product that is for the people that you want, and you make that really good, which they did.
They did.
And then
They
you
really
continue to support that with other things that add to that, the strengths of that product, then you're going to end up making money off of that. You know, give me more, you know, single player content, give me more tombs to explore, give me co-op tombs to explore with you. You know, give me those things. Those are the things that I want. I don't want multiplayer maps, and I'm not going to pay you for them, and you know, so why are you giving that to me? I don't want that. I don't want a spatula. I want a knife.
Don't want a knife spatula. That's right.
I do not want a knife spatula. And the people who want to play multiplayer, they might check it out for a second, but as soon as they play that, they're going to realize this is not as good as something else that I could be doing, and they're going to immediately drop that.
They're going to go back to Call of Duty or Halo or
they're going to go back to Call of Duty or Halo
whatever.
Or one of those games that functions a lot better for the multiplayer experience. And, you know, they might be really amused by this concept of a knife spatula for a second, but eventually they're just going to say, I just want a spatula that works.
Yep.
And they're going to go back to that. So, you know, that's kind of our thoughts on the multiplayer. It's just, it's not horrible, it's mediocre, and it really shouldn't be there.
We're just tired of finding multiplayer in games that really just should have nothing to do with it. Like, it just shouldn't be there.
Alright, so that's kind of our thoughts on Tomb Raider, guys. In short, we really, really loved it, except for the multiplayer. So,
that's right.
Definitely, if you're hesitant about playing it as far as the single player, you were concerned that, you know, this wasn't going to be a good game, or that maybe the multiplayer was going to detract from the single player, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. The
really
single player
fun,
is
really smooth
fantastic.
controls. Absolutely worth it.
Absolutely worth a play. So, that's kind of our thoughts on this game, and that wraps up our first video podcast thing. So definitely, we really want to know your thoughts. We want to know what you think about this. If you have ideas about topics or things or games or anything that you would like us to talk about, we are definitely willing to take suggestions. We definitely have ideas of our own, obviously.
Of course, we always do.
Something like this. But if you have, you know, thoughts, opinions, comments, feedback, please leave comments or send us a message and let us know. So that is Tomb Raider, and that's what these gamer girls are thinking about this week. No one wants a knife spatula.